Have you ever felt completely invisible, even when you're the center of attention? Imagine standing in a room shimmering with diamonds and crystal, wearing a gown worth more than you've ever earned, yet feeling like a ghost at your own wedding. This is a story about a love that was supposed to conquer all, but was instead poisoned by greed and cruelty. It's a story of a mother's desperate fight for her children, and a shocking discovery on a security camera that brought a powerful dynasty to its knees. Stay with me, because this journey is one you won't forget. Her name was Amelia, a name she chose for herself. The one given to her in the first foster home was long forgotten, a relic of a past she couldn't remember. Growing up in the New York foster care system, Amelia learned resilience the hard way. She was a quiet, determined girl who found solace in books and dreamed of a life defined by stability, not chaos. She put herself through nursing school at LaGuardia Community College, working nights as a hospital orderly to pay her bills. It was during one of those exhausting shifts that she met Julian Vance. He was charming, with eyes that seemed to see the strength she hid from the world. He was the heir to the Vance real estate fortune, a world away from her tiny Queens apartment. But he claimed to be suffocated by his family's expectations. And in Amelia, he saw a refreshing authenticity. For Amelia, Julian was a dream she never dared to have, a promise of the family she had always craved. The crystal chandelier above cast a fractured, unforgiving light on the grand ballroom of the plaza. Amelia stood near a marble column, the weight of her triple pregnancy pressing down on her spine. The silk of her custom-made wedding dress felt like a cage, its boning digging into her ribs. She had begged Julian's mother, Eleanor, for a simple City Hall wedding months ago, before the bump became a mountain. But Eleanor had insisted on this opulent spectacle, a performance for New York's elite. Amelia felt their eyes on her, their polite smiles barely concealing their judgment. She was the charity case, the foster kid who had somehow ensnared their golden boy. The exhaustion was overwhelming, a tidal wave of physical and emotional fatigue. She just needed a moment of quiet, a brief escape from the gilded prison of her own reception. Slipping out into the hushed, carpeted hallway, Amelia leaned against the wall, the cool plaster a relief against her skin. That's when she heard the voice, sharp and cold as ice, cutting through the muffled orchestra music. It was Eleanor, her back to Amelia, speaking with a woman dripping in sapphires. "Angela, darling, I don't know how I'm going to survive this travesty," Eleanor hissed, her voice a venomous whisper. "My Julian bringing this nobody home, pregnant with triplets no less. Can you imagine? I nearly fainted. We don't even know if they're his. She's a clever little stray, desperate for a Park Avenue address. My boy is so naive, a child really. He just kept saying he loved her. I thought he'd marry the architect's daughter, not this project." The words struck Amelia like physical blows, each one stealing a piece of her breath. The fairy tale shattered into a million sharp, glittering pieces right there in the hallway. A dry, choked cough escaped Amelia's lips. It was louder than she intended. Eleanor Vance spun around, her face a mask of practiced shock that quickly melted into a sickeningly sweet smile. "Amelia, dear, are you all right? You look dreadfully pale," she cooed, gliding over as if she hadn't just been dissecting Amelia's character. "You poor thing, this must be so exhausting for you. In your condition, you need to rest. Let me have our driver, Charles, take you home. We can handle the rest of the festivities without you. Go on, darling, you need your sleep." The hypocrisy was staggering, a performance so flawless it was terrifying. A wave of nausea, hot and bitter, washed over Amelia. She suddenly couldn't bear another second in that room, surrounded by strangers who despised her, married to a man whose mother was plotting against her. She nodded mutely, allowing herself to be dismissed from her own wedding. The cavernous Upper East Side apartment felt colder and emptier than ever. The driver had dropped her off with a silent, pitying glance. Amelia peeled off the heavy gown, letting it pool on the floor like a dead swan. She curled up on the king-size bed, the fine Egyptian cotton sheets feeling alien against her skin. Tears she had refused to shed, in front of Eleanor now streamed down her face, soaking the silk pillowcase. She cried for the little girl in the foster home who had dreamed of a perfect wedding day. She cried for the woman she was now, trapped and utterly alone. Hours later, the bedroom door creaked open. Julian stumbled in, his tuxedo askew, reeking of expensive scotch and a faint floral perfume that wasn't hers. He didn't even seem to notice her sobbing form on the bed. He just collapsed face down on the other side and began to snore, a dead weight in the life she no longer recognized as her own. Her own childhood flickered in her memory like a damaged film reel. There were no baby photos, no stories of her first words. Her life began, in a way, at age 3, on the steps of a social services building in the Bronx. She remembered snippets of her life before, shouting, the smell of stale beer, a woman's desperate pleas, and a pervasive sticky fear. The workers at the group home said she was withdrawn, barely spoke, and flinched at every loud noise. They named her Martha, a name she shared the moment she turned 18, replacing it with Amelia. The system was a monotonous grind of rules and routines, a life lived by the clock. While other kids rebelled, Amelia found a strange comfort in the predictability. It was a stark contrast to the chaos she vaguely remembered. She buried herself in her studies, seeing education as the only viable escape route, the only way to build a life that was truly her own. Nursing school was her anchor, the clinical precision, the focus on caring for others. It gave her a sense of purpose. She wasn't just a number in the system anymore. She was Amelia, the student who always aced her exams, the orderly who wasn't afraid of the messy, difficult parts of the job. She saw the raw vulnerability of people at their worst and learnt to meet it with a quiet competence. Her classmates would go out for drinks after a brutal shift, but Amelia would head to her tiny apartment in Queens, eat a simple meal, and study until her eyes burned. Romance was a luxury she couldn't afford, a distraction she didn't want. She'd seen too many girls in the foster system get derailed by a handsome face and empty promises. She had a plan. Career first, stability second, and then, maybe then, she would allow herself to think about a family, but the heart rarely sticks to a 5-year plan. He'd been admitted for a minor knee surgery after a squash injury. Julian Vance. Even his name sounded expensive. He was in the private wing of Lenox Hill, the part of the hospital Amelia rarely worked in. He was different from the other wealthy patients. He wasn't demanding or arrogant. He was polite, even a little bit shy, and he had a disarming smile that made her stomach flutter. He would make jokes to distract from his discomfort, and he always asked about her day, listening with genuine interest. A friendship sparked in the sterile, quiet environment of the hospital room. He told her about the immense pressure from his father to join the family business and his mother's relentless social climbing. It was a world so foreign to Amelia, yet his feelings of being trapped resonated with her on a deep level. He saw her as his escape, and she, foolishly, began to see him as her safe harbour. Their dates were a whirlwind tour of a New York she'd only seen in movies. Rooftop bars with glittering skyline views, quiet dinners in West Village restaurants, private gallery viewings. Julian loved to spoil her, but what Amelia cherished most were the simple moments. Walking through Central Park, holding his hand, feeling for the first time like she belonged somewhere, with someone. He was fascinated by her independence, her grit. "You're incredible, Mia," he'd say, using his pet name for her. "You built your whole life from nothing. I've had everything handed to me, and I still feel like I'm failing." She'd argue with him then. "You don't know how lucky you are, Jules, to have parents who care, even if they're overbearing. I would have given anything for that. You think independence is glamorous? It's terrifying when you know there's no safety net, no one to call if you fall." The first sign was a subtle, persistent nausea that she blamed on stress and too many night shifts. Then came the exhaustion, a bone-deep weariness that sleep couldn't fix. Her period, usually as regular as a Swiss watch, was late. A cold dread, mingled with a sliver of impossible hope, crept into her heart. She bought a pregnancy test from a 24-hour pharmacy, her hands trembling as she paid the cashier. Back in her small bathroom, the two pink lines appeared almost instantly, stark and undeniable against the white plastic. She sank to the floor, her back against the cool tile. A baby, their baby. The plan, her carefully constructed future, dissolved in an instant. All she could feel was a terrifying mix of elation and pure panic. How could she tell Julian this wasn't part of their carefree romantic script? She waited 2 months, the secret growing inside her, a constant hum of anxiety beneath the surface. Finally, she convinced Julian to come with her to an appointment, telling him she needed his support for a checkup. The ultrasound room was dark and cool. The gel was cold on her stomach. Amelia held Julian's hand, her knuckles white. She watched the grainy black and white image on the screen, her heart pounding. The obstetrician was silent for a long time, moving the wand slowly across her belly, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Well now," he said, a note of awe in his voice. "Let's see. There's 1, and there's 2, and, my goodness, it's 3. You're having triplets." The doctor's words seemed to echo in the small room. Triplets. The word was an explosion. Julian's hand went limp in hers. The world tilted on its axis. The cab ride back to her apartment was suffocatingly silent. Then Julian erupted. "Triplets, Mia! Triplets! How did this even happen? You're a nursing student, for God's sake. Didn't you know about protection?" The accusation hung in the air, sharp and ugly. "We're screwed! What am I going to tell my parents? They're going to kill me. Where are we supposed to live? In your tiny studio? There's barely room for 2 people, let alone 5. My father was going to give me a down payment on a condo for a wedding gift, but now, who knows how he'll react to this?" Amelia just stared out the window at the blurred city lights, tears streaming down her face. "Stop yelling at me," she whispered, her voice cracking, "as if I'm the only one responsible. You were there too. I'm scared, Julian. I'm so scared. Are you going to leave me now?" Seeing her tears, Julian's anger deflated, replaced by a familiar, boyish panic. He pulled her into an awkward hug, his movements jerky and uncertain. No, of course not. "I'm sorry. I'm just in shock," he murmured into her hair. "I won't leave you. They're my kids too. I guess we have to tell my parents. We'll have to get married. We'll figure it out. Together." His words were meant to be reassuring, but they lacked conviction. They sounded like a script he was reading, lines he knew he was supposed to say. Amelia clung to him, wanting desperately to believe him. She wanted to believe that the man she loved would rise to the occasion, that their love would be strong enough to weather this storm. But a cold knot of fear in her gut told her that this was just the beginning of a much larger battle. The Vance family mansion on the Upper East Side was a monument to old money and rigid tradition. The air inside felt heavy, scented with lemon polish and lilies. Eleanor and Richard Vance sat opposite them in a formal living room that looked more like a museum than a place where people lived. Julian, holding Amelia's hand in a sweaty grip, stammered through the news. "Mom, Dad, Mia's pregnant, and we're going to have 3 babies, so we need to get married." Eleanor's hand flew to her chest in a theatrical gasp, while Richard's face remained an unreadable, stony mask. A barrage of humiliating questions followed. They dissected Amelia's life under a microscope, her foster care background, her lack of family, her financial status. Each question was designed to remind her of how little she had and how unworthy she was of their son. It was an interrogation, not a welcome. The verdict was delivered with the chilling finality of a judge's sentence. Amelia would move into the mansion immediately. It was "for the sake of the children," Eleanor announced, her voice dripping with false concern. They would rent out Amelia's small apartment in Queens. "You can't raise triplets in a shoebox, dear," Eleanor had said with a dismissive wave of her hand. It wasn't an invitation. It was a command. And so began a new chapter of Amelia's life, one where she was a gilded prisoner. She no longer had to work her grueling, orderly job, a fact Eleanor lauded over her as a great act of charity. They allowed her to finish her classes, but the freedom she once had was gone. Every meal, every appointment, every moment was now under the watchful, critical eye of her future mother-in-law. She was a guest in a home where she was clearly not welcome. Eleanor Vance was a master of psychological warfare. To Amelia's face, she was all smiles and saccharine endearments. But the moment Julian came home from his job at his father's firm, Eleanor would pull him into the study for their private talks. Amelia could often hear the low murmur of her voice, a constant, poisonous drip. "Julian, darling, are you sure about this? She just lies in bed all day. I found her laundry mixed in with yours. She ruined your favourite silk shirt. And triplets. It's just so unusual. We've never had twins in our family, let alone triplets. Are you absolutely certain they're yours? You've only known her for a few months. This is a life sentence, my boy. 3 screaming babies. You're so young. You're giving up your entire future for a girl with nothing to her name." Julian would emerge from these meetings sullen and irritable. The easy affection he once showed Amelia began to curdle into resentment. He started finding fault in everything she did. "Mom's right, you really should be more careful with my clothes," he'd snap. Or, "I don't know if I'm ready for this, Mia. Maybe we rush things." The love and warmth that had defined their relationship were being systematically eroded, replaced by doubt and suspicion. He was weak, easily swayed by his mother's relentless campaign. She was isolating Amelia, turning the one person she was supposed to be able to count on into another one of her tormentors. Amelia felt like she was drowning, and the man who was supposed to be her life raft was watching her sink. Amelia had dreamed of her wedding day, a simple, beautiful ceremony. She imagined choosing a dress, tasting cakes, dancing with the man she loved. But Eleanor hijacked the entire process. She dismissed every one of Amelia's suggestions with a condescending smile. The date was postponed again and again, with a litany of flimsy excuses. The caterer wasn't up to her standards. The venue had a scheduling conflict. Eleanor was feeling unwell. Amelia soon realised the delays were intentional. Eleanor was waiting, deliberately pushing the wedding, until Amelia was in her 3rd trimester, heavy and uncomfortable. She wanted to present Amelia to her high society friends, not as a blushing bride, but as a bloated, desperate girl trapped by her circumstances. It was the ultimate public humiliation, orchestrated with chilling precision. The 2 weeks following the wedding were a special kind of hell. The money and gifts they received were whisked away by Eleanor and Richard, for safekeeping. Amelia never even saw the cheques. The emotional chasm between her and Julian had widened into an impassable canyon. He complained that her constant shifting and turning in bed kept him awake. "I have to be fresh for work," he'd say, as if his vaguely defined job was more demanding than gestating 3 human beings. One night, without a word, he took his pillow and blanket and moved into one of the many guest bedrooms down the hall. The rejection was a physical pain, a cold blade twisting in her gut. She was lonelier now, as a married woman in a mansion, than she had ever been as an orphan. One evening, Julian came into her room, avoiding her eyes. "I have to go on a business trip tomorrow," he announced flatly. "Some important real estate deal in Chicago. I'll be gone for about 3 weeks. A cold panic seized Amelia. 3 weeks? "Julian, you can't. My due date is just a month away. The doctor said with triplets, labour can start early. What if something happens? I'm scared. Please don't leave me here alone with them." He just scowled, his face a mask of annoyance. "Stop being so dramatic. You're not due for a month. My parents are here if anything happens. This is important for my career, Mia. I'm trying to provide for us, and all you do is complain." He turned and walked out, leaving her with the crushing weight of his indifference and the terrifying reality of her situation. This happened in the dead of night, exactly 1 week after Julian left. A sharp, tightening cramp woke her from a restless sleep. She tried to dismiss it, to breathe through it, but another one followed, stronger this time. Then another. This was it. It was too soon. A wave of pure, unadulterated terror washed over her. She was alone. She managed to stumble out of her room, and down the long dark hallway to Eleanor's suite. She banged on the door, her voice trembling. "Eleanor, help me! I think the babies are coming." The door opened a crack, and Eleanor peered out, her face a mask of irritation, her silk robe clutched at her throat. "For heaven's sake, what is all this noise? You're not due for weeks. Must you be so dramatic about everything?" But then Eleanor saw the sweat on Amelia's brow, the way she was doubled over in pain, and a flicker of something, not concern but perhaps fear of a mess, crossed her face. "Ah, very well," she sighed, as if Amelia were a massive inconvenience. "Don't you dare start having babies on my Persian rug. This is just a disaster." She picked up the phone and coolly requested an ambulance, her voice betraying no emotion. As the paramedics loaded a pale and trembling Amelia onto a stretcher, Eleanor stood at the top of the grand staircase, a distant, regal figure. She didn't offer a word of comfort. She didn't say she would follow. She just watched them take her daughter-in-law away, a problem being conveniently removed from her house. At Lenox Hill, the doctors managed to stop the premature labour, but the situation was precarious. They put her on strict hospital bed rest until the birth. "We can't risk sending you home," the doctor explained gently. Amelia was trapped in the sterile white room, the rhythmic beeping of monitors her only company. Her first instinct was to call Julian, to tell him what happened, to beg him to come home. But his phone went straight to voicemail, every single time. The business trip excuse now seemed laughably thin. She tried calling Eleanor, but her calls went unanswered. The isolation was a physical ache, a profound loneliness that was almost worse than the physical discomfort. She was about to bring 3 lives into the world, and she had never felt more alone. Her only bright spot was Brenda, a cleaner in her late 50s, with kind eyes and a warm, no-nonsense demeanour. Brenda would linger in her room a little longer than she had to, fluffing Amelia's pillows and offering a cheerful word. "Don't you worry, sweetie," she'd say, noticing the unsent food on Amelia's tray. "Hospital food is a crime against humanity. I'll bring you a little something from home tomorrow." She spoke of her brother, Liam, and her small but close-knit family. For the first time in months, someone was speaking to Amelia with simple, uncomplicated kindness. Brenda's presence was a lifeline in a sea of clinical indifference and familial cruelty. She was a reminder that goodness still existed in the world. The days bled into one another, a monotonous cycle of vital signs and worry. The silence from Julian and his family was deafening. A terrible suspicion began to take root in Amelia's mind. This wasn't a business trip. This was abandonment. Desperate for any news, she finally broke down in front of Brenda. "Please," she sobbed, pressing her crumpled note into the woman's hand. "This is his parents' address. I know it's a huge thing to ask, but could you please go there? Just give this to Julian. Maybe he just doesn't know how bad it is. Maybe if he gets this note, he'll come." Brenda looked at the address on the paper, then at Amelia's tear-streaked face, and her expression hardened with resolve. "I'll do it on my break, honey. You just try and rest." When Brenda returned at the start of her next shift, the usual warmth in her eyes was gone, replaced by a cold, protective fury. She came straight to Amelia's bedside. "Honey, you need to be strong," she began, her voice low. "Your husband, he's there. He's not on any trip." She took a deep breath. "I saw him. He came out of that big house and got into a car with some skinny blonde. I tried to give him your note. I called his name. He looked right at me, then at the girl and said, 'You must be mistaken. I don't know any Amelia.' Then he tore up your note, sweetheart. He tore it up and threw it on the ground. I'm so sorry. The man's a coward and his family. They're poison." The world went white. Brenda's words were a gunshot to the heart, a final, brutal confirmation of everything Amelia had feared. He had not just left her, he had erased her. The pain was immense, a physical agony that radiated from her chest. At that exact moment, a powerful, undeniable contraction seized her entire body. A warm gush of fluid soaked the hospital sheets beneath her. Her water had broken. Brenda's eyes widened in alarm. "Oh, Lord Jesus, you're in labour!" she cried, hitting the call button for the nurse. "Hold on, baby girl. Hold on. I'm right here. You're not alone." The shock and grief had triggered the one event she was no longer prepared for. The babies were coming, whether she was ready or not. The delivery was a blur of organised chaos and excruciating pain, but the head obstetrician was a master of his craft, calm and reassuring. Against all odds, she delivered all 3 babies naturally, 2 boys and a girl. As the nurses placed the tiny, wailing bundles in her arms, a wave of love so fierce and primal washed over her, eclipsing the pain and the heartbreak. She looked at their perfect miniature faces, their tiny fingers curling around hers, and she wept. She cried tears of overwhelming joy for these 3 miracles, and tears of profound sorrow for the life she had imagined for them, a life with a father who loved them. In that moment, holding her children, she was both the happiest and the most heartbroken person on earth. Discharge day arrived with terrifying swiftness. The nurses buzzed around her, giving instructions on feeding schedules and swaddling techniques, but all Amelia could feel was a rising tide of panic. She had nothing. No car seats, no cribs, no diapers. She had no way to even get her 3 babies back to her old apartment in Queens. She was supposed to go home to a mansion, to a husband. Now she was a homeless, single mother of 3. Swallowing her pride, she called Brenda, her voice thick with desperation. "Brenda, I don't know who else to ask. My old apartment, it's being rented out. I need to ask the tenants to leave. I have nowhere to go. I can't even carry all 3 of them by myself." Brenda's voice was firm and calm on the other end. "Don't you worry about a thing. My brother Liam and I, we'll be there. We've got you." True to her word, Brenda was there, and with her was a tall, quiet man with kind eyes and a noticeable limp. This was her brother, Liam. He didn't say much, but his presence was a steady, calming force. He just nodded at Amelia, his gaze filled with a quiet understanding, and began expertly and gently securing the babies into the 3 new car seats he had brought. "Brenda told me you could use a hand," was all he said. Just as they were preparing to leave, a small crowd gathered near the hospital exit. It was a camera crew from a local news channel. Someone at the hospital, amazed by the story of the triplets born to a single mother, had tipped them off. It was a human interest story. The reporter was kind, asking Amelia gentle questions as the camera rolled. "It's a miracle," the reporter said. 3 healthy babies. Amelia, exhausted, but radiating a fierce maternal love, held one of her children, her face a mixture of pride and vulnerability. Liam, seeing her discomfort with the attention, instinctively moved to her side, helping Brenda with the other 2 car seats. For a few seconds the camera framed them together. The beautiful young mother, her 3 precious newborns, and the strong, quiet man, standing protectively beside them. To the world watching the evening news, they looked like a family, a tired but proud new family, facing the world together. The image was powerful, and it was about to change everything. In the Vance mansion, the evening news was on. Eleanor watched in horror as the story of the miracle triplets of Lenox Hill filled the screen. And there was Amelia, looking tired but beautiful. And beside her was a strange man, a handsome, rugged man with a limp. "I told you," she shrieked at Julian. "I told you she was cheating. Those aren't your children. There's the real father." But her plan to ruin Amelia had backfired spectacularly. A man named David Chen was watching that same news broadcast. Years ago, his son had been saved from a speeding car by a heroic stranger who then disappeared. He recognized the man on the screen instantly. It was Liam. David sought them out, and in gratitude, he gave Liam a high-level job at his company and gifted Amelia a brand-new, fully furnished 3-bedroom apartment. Eleanor, enraged that her victim was now thriving, did the unthinkable. She hired criminals to kidnap the children from Central Park. It was a desperate, evil act, but the kidnappers were startled by a homeless man named Frank, who had been sleeping on a nearby bench. He managed to scare them off and hide the babies until Amelia and a frantic Liam found them. Frank's testimony, along with evidence from the kidnappers, led directly back to Eleanor Vance. Her empire crumbled. Stripped of her wealth and facing a long prison sentence, her mind finally snapped. Julian, consumed by guilt and debt, simply vanished. Amelia, Liam, and their 3 children built a new life, a true family. Even taking in Frank, the unlikely hero who saved them. They proved that family isn't about blood or money, it's about the love and loyalty you build together. Thank you for listening to our story. If you were moved by Amelia's journey, please give this video a like, subscribe for more powerful stories, and share your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think is the true definition of family?